As Sybil has already alluded to, the question for us today is whether we have enough or whether we're feeling a little bit empty. I don't know if you've ever had that experience of running on empty. I can remember not too terribly long ago driving to work, and as I pulled into my parking space, I heard that little ding ding coming from the dashboard, reminding me that the low fuel indicator was telling me that I was a little bit low on gas. Well, since I had just arrived at work, I figured, I'll take care of that on my way home tonight. Well, it turns out that day, my wife and I had different errands that we needed to do, and for some reason, she needed my car and I needed hers, one of those situations. Anyway, we switched keys and switched vehicles, and I didn't tell her that I was on empty. But I guess I figured she probably would figure it out. Well, she went ahead and she did her errands, and she was able to do them with no trouble, no problem. And we switched our cars later that evening, and I remembered that I had a couple errands to take care of, so I went and I got in the car, didn't bother looking at the gauge to see how things were, and I drove, it seemed like, all over town and made it back home with no trouble. And then just as I was pulling into the driveway, I once again heard that ding ding and went, oh, she didn't fill it up while she had it. I didn't fill it up while I had it. I'd better take care of it first thing in the morning, right? Well, I don't know how many of you have kids and you have a little bit of a hectic schedule in the morning. On that next particular morning, I think we were running a little bit late. My son had to get to an appointment. My daughter had to get to school. And of course, things were hectic and crazy and we were rushed. But I also realized that if I didn't stop for gas, we were going to be even more further behind schedule than I had intended. Running out of gas would not have been a good idea. And so the first thing that I did was go to the nearest gas station. And the whole way we were heading that direction, I found myself saying, come on, we can make it. We can do this, right? You ever say those little prayers, Lord, please help me make it to the next nearest gas station? I wasn't sure at that moment if I had enough, if there was enough in the tank to get to where we needed to go. And I was hoping that the car could hang in there for just a little bit longer so we could go and get filled up again. Well, I have good news for you. I know you were waiting to hear, yes, I broke down. I was sitting on the side of the road and I had to call AAA to come and rescue me, right? That would have been what I deserved after all that kind of loosey-goosey approach to things. But I made it to the gas station. I got away with it. Praise the Lord. But driving my car is not the only time I've ever asked the question, do I have enough? And I'm sure that there's times that you've asked that question too. Do you have enough? Do I have enough left in the tank? Can I hang in there long enough to get filled up once again? I don't know how things have been for you lately. It's been a little bit hectic for us. Our oldest sons were away from home for the summer doing their summer jobs, and now they've come home. And our house is a little more lively and a little more active and a little more hectic than it had been. So there's a little bit of adjustment going on there. We also, during the summer, had some pretty significant staff changes that took place. And in the interim period, while we've been looking for new people to take their place, we've had to kind of cover and learn new jobs and figure out how to do our own work and then cover the other responsibilities that are going on. And finally, we've been able to bring in some new people. But today, as a matter of fact, it's a little bit crazy because we have 8 staff total that we work with. And today, 2 of them are on vacation. One is still coming on board, so she hasn't actually started working yet. We've got another that has some sick days that are being taken, and another who's on jury duty. So we're a little bit short and a little bit rushed, find ourselves in a little bit of a hectic pace right now because life seems to throw curveballs at us every now and again. Now, I know I shouldn't tell you all my troubles because you probably have enough of your own, right? You can shake your head, right? You've got enough problems of your own. You probably have reports to do and projects that are in the middle of things and you're trying to get all the pieces put together and so that you can move forward with it. You've probably got a long chain of emails that you're trying to answer, or you've got core officers that you've reached out to for information and they still haven't gotten back to you, right? I might be one of those. I apologize. I worked at DHQ for 15 years, first as an employee and then at different appointments. So I have a sense about how that sometimes goes. And sometimes it seems like we have so many things on our list, so many things putting pressure on us, not just at work, but in home and with our families, that we just find ourselves thinking, man, do I have enough? Am I going to make it? Am I going to get to the place where there's an end to this, or I can get filled up again, or I can be renewed so that I can deal with what's coming tomorrow or next week? Do I have enough fuel in the tank to get me where I need to go, right? You felt that way before? Well, I can tell you that for myself, when I find myself asking the question, do I have enough? The answer is pretty simple. Nope. Absolutely not. I ain't got it. I don't have enough. I am tapped out. I'm burned out. I got nothing left in the tank. You ever feel that way? Can't do anything more. I am completely empty. Well, Sybil read for us a story about somebody else who was completely empty. Story of that widow from 2 Kings chapter 4. Story of the widow that came to the prophet Elisha. She had a huge problem. She was overwhelmed by her circumstances, like we often are. Overwhelmed by the fact that she owed a great deal of money. She had a great debt that she had taken on from her husband, and it looked like her sons were going to be sold into slavery, and she didn't want that. She was feeling pretty desperate. She didn't know what to do, where to turn. And all that she had that had any value was just a little bit of olive oil. Well, what did Elisha tell her to do? Gather up all the jars that you can, bring them here, start filling them up. I imagine she must have been scratching her head going, that doesn't make any sense. I got a jar here. You can see how much there is. Why do I need more? But she did what he asked. She had her sons bring them in, and she started filling up the jars. And as she did, she found out that there was actually enough to fill up the first jar. And there was enough to fill up the second jar. And somehow there was enough to fill up the third jar and the fourth jar and the fifth jar. However many jars she had collected, the oil didn't stop flowing out of the one that she began with until she was out of jars. It only stopped when she no longer needed any more. She was able to pay her debt, and she and her sons were able to live off the rest. Now, there's another story in the book of Exodus that tells us how while the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, that God provided for them. Remember what kind of food he provided? Provided manna, bread in the wilderness. He provided enough for them to eat every day, but usually just enough for each day. Exodus 16:18 says, when they measured it by the omer, they measured the quantity that they collected each day, said that the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone gathered just as much as they needed. See, God had promised them that they would be filled with bread, and then they would know that he was the Lord, their God. And in that case, God made good on his promise. For the people who were wandering in the wilderness, they always had enough to eat. And for this widow who wasn't sure how she was going to pay her debts and whether she had enough items of value to be able to do something about it, God made sure that she had enough. I think the point's clear, right? God always has enough. We might be empty. We might not have enough. Our tank may have run dry, but God always has enough. My encouragement for you today is this. The Lord who provided manna in the wilderness to the Israelites thousands of years ago, and the Lord who provided the oil for the widow is the same God who provides for you and I today. No different. God didn't change his character in between now and then. He's the same God with the same resources, with the same love and the same ability to provide his provisions. And when we trust in him, God can do that, even when it seems to defy all human logic. When you and I have run out of energy, and when you and I have run out of patience, When we've lost our focus and our enthusiasm has boiled away and we don't have any courage or enough stamina to get through, or whatever it is, when we feel like we got too many jars to fill, we got too many items on our to-do list, we might be empty and we might be running with an empty tank, and we might feel like we don't have enough and we need to get refueled somehow. But God always has enough, and he can keep on refilling us and refueling us until all our jars are full. Amen? 2 Corinthians 12:9, the Lord tells Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness." I'm sufficient for you. Trust in me. Trust in God. That's where our sufficiency, that's where our strength, that's where the enough comes from. And when we do that, Paul concluded, "I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power can rest on me." God's grace is sufficient. He is enough. Whatever jars you might have to fill today, or whatever challenges or complications you might be going through, whether here at work or at home with family, don't worry about if you have enough, because chances are you probably don't. If you're like me, if you're human, we don't have enough, but God does. The God who created you and who loves you offers you his sufficient grace, his enough, to help you make it through whatever challenge you might be facing. There's a song in our songbook that goes like this. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength is gone, ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving, it's only begun. His love has no limit, his grace has no measure, his power no boundary known unto men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus he giveth and giveth and giveth again. I pray you know that God can give and give and give